right, good afternoon, everyone. It looks like we are ready to go. I want to thank you all for joining us today for the webinar, What is an AED, featuring Zoll Medical. My name is Amber Hubbard. I'm the marketing specialist at HeartSmart. I am joined by Kelly Parker, who is the strategic distribution manager at Zoll. We are very excited to have the opportunity to teach everyone more about AEDs and what AED options you have with Zoll. Before I turn things over to Kelly, there are a few things I want to mention before we get started. First, by joining us today, you are automatically entered into a drawing for a chance to win a free Zoll AED Plus. We will draw the winner at the end of the presentation, and you must be present to win, so stick with us. If you do win, we will be reaching out to you via the chat option to get your shipping information. Second, since we have so many people joining us today, please mute yourself and turn your camera off. This will give our attendees the best experience. If you have any questions or comments during the demo, please feel free to type them into the chat option as well. We will be doing a Q&A at the end, and I will get to them during that portion of the presentation. So without further ado, I will let Kelly take it away.
Thank you, Amber. Can you hear me okay? Okay, perfect. Hi, everybody. Like Amber said, my name is Kelly Parker, and I work for Zoll Medical. I'm based in Houston, Texas, and I'm very excited to be speaking and talking with you all today. I know I can't see you, but just know that I wish we could be in person, but this will have to suffice. So if you've ever watched a medical drama on TV, chances are you've seen someone miraculously shocked back to life by a doctor who yells something along the lines of, charge to 400, clear, and then all of a sudden, boom, jolt of electricity, and their hearts are beating again, and everything's back to normal. Well, the machine that they're using is a defibrillator, and those aren't only limited to hospitals or hospital settings. In fact, AEDs are automated external defibrillators, and they are doing all of the same analyzing and shocking without a doctor present, but just in a much smaller, portable, easy to use format. So why would we need an AED? Something obviously we're going to drill into today. What are they? But we'll start with why would someone use an AED? And their main purpose and functionality is really to revive someone in sudden cardiac arrest. So we'll start there. Next slide, please. Now, quick background on cardiac arrest, just because oftentimes it's linked to a heart attack and as being one and the same, but really they're fundamentally different. So, and in case you see my very large dog walking behind me, I promise it's just a dog. He kind of looks like a bear, but anyway, so a heart attack is where a portion of our blood supply, or a lot of it, is reduced to our heart tissue, causing, obviously we all know what the symptoms are, but there's an obstruction there. Think of it as like a plumbing issue. Now, those symptoms can be severe. They'll vary in how long it takes for us to even notice, but it's distinctly different than a cardiac arrest, because in cardiac arrest, our hearts are doing what's called fibrillating, or quivering uncontrollably due to electrical activity that's uncontrollable. At that exact point, our blood is no longer being pumped to our brain and other organs. Somebody would become unresponsive, not be able to breathe, and immediate intervention is required. Now, a heart attack also we associate with maybe a certain age group, certain physical fitness level. There's some other extenuating conditions that might lead to a heart attack. But the other big difference with cardiac arrest is there's a number of things that can cause us to go into this event, if you will, to cause our heart to beat uncontrollably. Of course, there is underlying heart condition or underlying heart issue, but also electrocution, whether through water, live electricity, lightning. If we're electrocuted, we can go into cardiac arrest. Another thing is asphyxiation. If we are either choking due to an allergic reaction or physical compression on our chest, that alone can send our heart into an arrhythmia, where electricity would be required for intervention. The last thing is blunt force trauma, be it a baseball, softball, car accident, a punch. Lots of different things can cause us to go into this chaotic, out of control event where, like I mentioned, immediate intervention is required. And that intervention includes CPR and an AED. So next slide, please. Now, obviously, today we are focusing on AEDs, but why is CPR important? Well, let's say an AED is brought to someone's side. Only half of the time will that AED actually recommend a shock, say shock required, and deliver the shock. The other half of the time, it might be a particular arrhythmia that isn't shockable, but it's still going to recommend and will always recommend 100% of the time that CPR is required. And then in those other instances where maybe you don't have an AED, maybe you're waiting for someone to bring it back, 100% of the time that people are not breathing or unresponsive, CPR is required because, as I mentioned, the brain most importantly, but all of our other organs needs oxygen. And since our heart isn't doing it on its own, the CPR is actually going to manually push the blood from the heart to the brain. Now you see the visual on the right. So alone, just with CPR alone, it can almost double survivability because it's really extending that timeline out for how long the brain will remain oxygenated before an AED or EMS comes to the scene. But next slide, please. When we start talking about CPR and an AED, this slide really drives home the importance of both being used immediately. In 2018, the American Heart Association reported that in the US alone, there were 356,000 cardiac arrest events. That's a lot over the course of 2018. And out of every 10 of those, only one survived, which is grim. But when an AED and CPR were brought to the patient within minutes, upwards of 5 out of 10 of them could have survived. So today's messaging is very important. I can't reinforce it enough. In the bottom left, you'll see some information. There was another study done since a lot of us are at work when we're going into cardiac arrest. There was a study to see for those of us that go to an office or work in a facility or wherever, how many folks know about the AEDs nearby where they would work, right? How do they know if they exist, where they are? And the scary data that came from that was that only 50% of folks could locate an AED at their specific place of work. So if you go back to the top graph, right, where 1 out of 10 without an AED will survive. Maybe 5 out of 10 with one will. But if only half of us know where AEDs are to begin with, it's just not a positive outlook. So the more AEDs we have, the better, but really making sure we're educating those that are around us in our organizations where the AEDs are and why they might need them. The bottom right-hand visual gives you some information. You know, one of the 4 things that I talked about that could cause us to go into cardiac arrest is heart damage or an underlying heart condition. And obviously in the past couple years, the whole world has been turned upside down with COVID. And there's a lot of people walking around today that have recovered from COVID, but there's a chance that they might have long-term heart damage. We're seeing more and more folks that completely healthy otherwise are still seeing some residual damage to their heart muscle. And that could also add or contribute to why they might go into cardiac arrest. So in a few years, I'd be interested to see where that number goes from 350,000, if it kind of stays there or if it goes up. But either way, this is really just meant to encapsulate the significance of, with an AED and CPR, how many more people we might have with us today. Next slide, please. So what is an AED? I know I already mentioned it, but it stands for Automated External Defibrillator. And really, it cannot be any more user-friendly, whether it's with voice prompts, a text display, some utilize lights, but altogether, they will be giving step-by-step instructions for how you can intervene and try to help save somebody's life. Next slide, please. Now, in the hospital, you have a doctor holding the paddles, reading the heart rhythm, determining a shock level, saying clear, and delivering the electricity. With an AED in the public, it's doing all of that on its own. So there's the 3-lead heart, the graph at the bottom of the screen. You can see on the left-hand side, that's when the heart is quivering, it's fibrillating very uncontrollably, no blood is being pumped. On its own, that AED is going to assess the arrhythmia, determine if a shock is needed. If so, it's almost like a Control-Alt-Delete on our computers. It will deliver a shock. The heart will essentially, think of a computer, reset, reorganize, and reestablish a normal sinus rhythm. Where on the right-hand side, you see it going back to a heart rhythm like we're used to seeing. And then at that point is when blood would begin to flow on its own, and we go to that 5 out of 10 surviving versus 1 out of 10. Next slide, please. So now, as Amber mentioned, I'm going to talk just for a few minutes about the AEDs that Zoll has available for you to choose from. Now, there are lots of AEDs in the market. Personally, I think the most important thing is just to have an AED, right? But today I'd like to just share with you a little bit more about the 3 that we have, and really what all of our technology is grounded in and grounded upon, which is CPR feedback. So based on the graphs we saw earlier, CPR alone we know can increase survivability. We also know that it is extremely daunting of a task to have somebody use their own hands pressing in the middle of someone else's rib cage. They might know the person, it could be a family member, but either way, they're having to press 2 to 2.4 inches deep. That's what the American Heart Association says. At 100 beats per minute for upwards of 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes. 100 beats per minute is similar to, if you think of the song Staying Alive by the Bee Gees, and you're pressing 2 inches into someone's chest that isn't breathing. I'll stop there. I can really talk about it. It's scary. So in 2013, there was a group of EMS professionals in Mesa, Arizona that did a study that determined if our defibrillator equipment helped us, there was something called CPR feedback. With CPR feedback, how much better could our CPR be? They felt confident in their CPR without it. So there was a study where 2 years they used their defibrillators without feedback, and then 2 years with it. And what they saw is that survivability more than doubled. And these are with professional first responders. So Zoll believes that not only from that study, but just generally speaking, CPR is so important. We have incorporated feedback technology into each of our 3 AED models. Now, what that means, what does feedback mean? The technology within the electrodes themselves has what's called accelerometer technology that is going to essentially observe the depth and speed that you are doing compressions and correct you if it's not adequate or high quality based on the American Heart Association guidelines. Now, what does that sound or look like more specifically? Next slide, please. You'll see at the bottom are the specific prompts you would hear from each of our AEDs. On the far left, the AED Plus, in the middle, the PowerHeart G5, and on the far right, our newest model, the Zoll AED 3. Each of these AEDs has it equipped within it, so it wouldn't be an extra piece that you'd have to plug in within the pads themselves, because we know 100% of the time that an AED is used, CPR will be required. And we believe, would you rather guess that you're doing CPR correctly, or would you rather know? And so with the AED Plus, you'll see both it and the 3 are going to correct us if we are not pushing hard enough. On the AED 3, it's a full color screen where you can actually see a depth gauge, so you can also visually see how deep am I going, how deep do I need to go. And if we're not there, it will say push harder until we're pushing hard enough, at which point we'll hear good compressions. The G5, both in English and in Spanish, at the touch of a button, is also going to correct us on our rate by saying press faster, press slower, also press softer, or press harder and fully release. So, and the names you see, Real CPR Help, iCPR, Enhanced Real, that's a lot of different names. But the biggest thing I wanted to drive home today was that with your Zoll AEDs, you can rest assured that at the time of the event, at the most critical time, that AED is not only going to help analyze and shock if need be to get that person out of cardiac arrest, but it's also going to guide you through the most daunting part of a rescue, which is CPR. Now, the next step of this presentation I am very excited about. Next slide, please. Oh man, I was so excited I jumped ahead. So like I mentioned, we will have a time for Q&A later. I would love for anybody that has a question, whether it's about an AED that you have or have had, a story you've heard, please feel free to share it. Went ahead and started with these four just because they're very common and we get asked a lot. So we'll start with the one on the far left. So how long can I keep my AED for? Realistically, if they're maintained properly, we've seen AEDs out in the market anywhere between 10, 12 years, if not even a little bit longer. From the manufacturer, each AED will have a specific warranty length. It can range 7, 8 years, normally around there. During that warranty time frame, you will still need to replace pads and batteries, but if something were to go wrong or to break on the AED itself, we as the manufacturer would cover the cost of that solution. After the warranty, that cost would be on you or the owner of the AED. So some folks like to replace at the end of warranty, and some people replace maybe a few years later and budget thereafter, knowing that they could potentially have to pay to fix it if something were to go wrong. So will having an AED be a liability to my business? In 2010, that was when all 50 states had enacted some type of law, regulation, or at least a documentation about owning AEDs, all of which endorsing more AEDs to be purchased and deployed throughout the community. We also see OSHA, American Heart Association. There are federal laws all declaring the significance and life-saving benefits of having AEDs. Really, the standard of care has shifted towards having one almost as a necessity versus not. So really, not having an AED could pose a liability just because the standard of care in so many industries is to have one. But if you were to have one, it can't add any liability unless you're not maintaining it properly, which again, whichever manufacturer AED you have, I always recommend you ask them specifically, what do I need to do to maintain this? As long as you're doing that, having an AED alone cannot be a liability. How many AEDs do I need? This one, I really wish that there was a clear answer. So we think of fire extinguishers, has to do with time or space, distance in between one to the next, very clear black and white regulations. With AEDs, it's all about time. Our brain can only go for so long without oxygen. So the American Heart Association starts there, right? In order to give people the best chance of a favorable outcome, American Heart recommends if someone goes down, we can get to an AED and back to them within 3 minutes. So think of your building and think of the furthest point. Where could you get in your building walking 90 seconds, right? So if you were to walk there and back, and then it becomes a secure access conversation, because if some employees at a building might not have access past a certain door, then even though theoretically they could get to the AED and back within 90 seconds, if their key card doesn't give them access, then we'll need more AEDs on either side of the door, if that makes sense. Also think of, I know schools, for lockdowns or fire drills, if the school goes into, let's say, a code, whatever their internal process is for a lockdown, there could be certain doors blocked off and you cannot open. That's another reason why, or something you'll want to consider when thinking how many AEDs might I need. And I will say there's plenty of resources available to kind of look at those site assessments and figure out specifically how many you would need. Can you hurt someone while using an AED? So that's a two-part no and no. You can't hurt yourself and you can't hurt them because, like we mentioned, the AED will only shock if a shock is required. Now, I've seen instances in the past where after a couple minutes and a couple rounds, the AED might actually recognize, oh, hey, now a shock is needed. But if you were to put an AED on me right now, it is not going to shock me. It will say begin CPR, which I wouldn't love if somebody to do CPR on me right now, but the AED is not going to hurt anybody. It's only going to take a story of exactly what's happening with the heart, which can always be used later, will only shock if need be. And some AEDs, like we mentioned, even if they don't shock, they will help guide you and make sure that you're doing proper CPR compressions. So those are a few to get us started. I think I see some questions coming in, but now I am excited to introduce a very, very good colleague and friend of mine by the name of Damian Dollard. This is best case scenario here. It's what keeps us waking up in the morning, keeps us up at night, is when we get an opportunity to like this. So Damian, you take it away. Thank you.
Thanks, Kelly. Hello, everyone. My name is Damian Dollard, and I am the channel partner manager for Zoll Medical for the state of Florida. I'd like to start off by talking about, I've been selling AEDs and talking about AEDs for the last 16 years, and I'd never used one on a person before. Granted, I talked about it just about every day, but all that changed on April 8th of last year, where I was at a hotel and actually had to use it on someone that we're going to talk about today, Anthony. But I often like to start off by talking about what led up to this and how did I end up at this particular place where I wasn't even intending to be. Because on April 7th, I was actually finishing up a meeting and had every intention to have dinner with a client. And for some reason, he had to cancel after our meeting, which was about 5:15. And so it was at that point I decided, well, it's about an hour and a half away. Um, I'll just drive up to Melbourne, Florida, and decided to look for a hotel and picked one out and started driving. And on my way there, I called my client that I was going to be meeting with the next day to tell him that, hey, let's try to meet at the hotel as opposed to our original meeting spot. And that's where the story really starts, because that morning, April 8th, about 9:45, I was preparing for my meeting at 10 o'clock, and something just told me to go outside, get a breath of fresh air. And I noticed right behind my car, a gentleman was going down. And as I was approaching, I noticed his friend looked up at me with a look you'll never forget. And I immediately turned around and ran back inside to tell them to call 911. I ran back outside to see if I can help. And at that point, once I got beside him, realizing that he was no longer breathing, and I just simply reached around, popped the trunk of my car, because where he actually went down was at the trunk of my vehicle. And as I've said before, I've been selling AEDs for 16 years, so I had AEDs in my vehicle, in my trunk. So I immediately pulled it out and I put it on Anthony. And within 8 to 10 seconds, it actually advised a shock, and it shocked him. At that point, it advised me to start CPR. So as you remember, I said I've never done CPR on a human before. I've talked about it. And so when I started to do compressions, I realized that this was harder than I thought. And as I'm doing my compressions, the machine is telling me to push harder. And I'm doing about 1 minute and 41 seconds of compressions. And the machine told me twice to push harder. But it was at that 1 minute and 41 second time place that Anthony opened his eyes and took his next breath of life. And that forever changed the lives of both of us and his family. And so it's at this time that I would like Anthony to share his part of the story with his lovely wife, Nicole. And it's all yours.
Thank you, Damian. How you doing, everybody? My name's Anthony Battaglia. I'm 42 years old, and I'm a sudden cardiac arrest survivor. It's a pretty crazy story for everything to line up the way it did with Damian's timing and his choice to stay at that hotel. And I can't tell you how grateful and thankful I am, but it was just a regular Thursday morning. I was down there because I'm from New Jersey. And my colleague and I was meeting him in the parking lot to hand him off some marketing material. We did a trade show the night before, and my wife, Nicole, was coming down. We were going to spend the weekend just to get away from the kids. With COVID and all this and that, she was going to come down to Florida for a weekend. And my colleague showed up, and I went into the back of my car to hand him off some marketing material. I reached into the back of my car, I pulled out my suitcase, and I hit the ground. I collapsed. I remember my heart was pounding so fast, like it was going to literally come out of my chest. And I remember hearing the voice of my colleague talking to somebody. And I just recently, when I saw Damien a week ago, 2 weeks ago in Florida, I'm putting the pieces together, because this still hasn't happened. Just about a year ago, that my colleague was talking to Damien. And those were the last few things I remember hearing, because everything started to kind of like fade, and everything went completely white. And then I was complete VFib. I don't know exactly how many minutes had passed, but when I started coming back into it, I remember telling Damien, stop pushing, because he was pushing so hard. And I think one of the paramedics at that point was there, and the guy said, welcome back. And they, I had lines sticking out of me and whatnot. And I told the guy, don't tell my wife. She's going to be mad. It's so surreal, and I'm so grateful Damien was there, because I always say this, we have 4 little kids, and I put 2 feet on the ground every day because of Damien. He's my best friend, and I love him, and I'm so grateful for him being there. It's not going to be a day go by that I don't thank him, whether I talk to him or not, but I love you, buddy. Thank you.
Same here, buddy. Same here, man. Love you.
Thank you for having me, everyone.
I think, Amber, do you want to take it over? Or Kelly, I think you're going to do some questions. Unless Nicole is there. It's Nicole?
She's not. She's downstairs filming at the moment. She couldn't be on today. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I was waiting for Nicole. But yeah, let's start with our live Q&A. It looks like we have some great questions that came in.
We'll start with the Q&A, and also I can't not say, Anthony, always a pleasure seeing you, seeing your smile. Damien, I love you, seeing you too. But these webinars are important. I just came through this leadership training class, and it talked about when you're delivering a message, right? What's something that I could do to make my message survive? And with this particular topic, yes, I can tell you guys a lot of things about AEDs, but it's messages and it's stories like Anthony's that I believe will help keep this message alive forever. It's because of an AED at the right time, the right place, Damien having it there, knowing how to use it, and using it properly, that Anthony's still with us. And so I gotta say thank you again to you guys for everything, and Anthony especially for coming on and having the courage to share your story. So I'll jump into the live Q&A. There were some questions that came in, and we'll get going. So the first one was electrode pads, if they can be used more than once, and they cannot. So whether or not you open them up and place them on somebody, or just open them up even, once that seal has been broken, then we would need to replace those electrode pads. And reason being is because the viability of that gel is so important to ensure proper reading and analysis of the heart, that even when it's been opened once, they are then deemed having been used. So they're one-time use only, but not necessarily, that's not necessarily the same for batteries. That would just be AED specific. But for electrode pads, one-time use only. Another question was, where should I store my AED? Now, without knowing where you work or where you might want to keep your AED, I think the most important thing to focus on is that AEDs are 2 things. Number 1, easily accessible. So not behind any locked doors or locked cabinets. or behind. I mean, I've seen them behind bookshelves. I've seen them so high up that most average height people couldn't even see it, let alone grab it. But easily accessible and central to wherever the majority of people will be gathered. So if, think to your relative or respective building or place where you might need the AED. And as long as they're easily accessible and central, I think that's most important. And then the second piece is wherever you end up storing your AED, if a lot of people or everyone knows where it's at, then and they can easily get to it, that's normally the biggest challenge is in an emergency situation, people looking around, where is the AED? That's the biggest question. So as long as it's easily accessible, central, and people know where it's at, then you can really keep it in a lot of places. Are AEDs available in different languages? So yes, there are a lot of AEDs, and again, whether it's with HeartSmart or, if you have AEDs, you can call the manufacturer of them right now. Some AEDs are available to be built, whether it's with software or otherwise, to be shipped internationally and to have different languages. Some AEDs today offer multi-language just at the time that you purchase it. So, for example, the G5 in the US, if you were to buy a G5, it would be built with a text display and audible English, and then a button where you could everything you would read or hear would be in Spanish. And that one, similar to others across the world, there would be other languages outside of English and Spanish. Let's see, which Zoll AEDs offer English and Spanish. So right off the bat, like I said, the G5 would ship to you today. Well, at some point, whenever it ships to you, with English and Spanish. But internationally, I would just consult with HeartSmart if there's a specific AED plus, if you need a specific language, whether it's Spanish or otherwise, and we can get you all the information that you would need there. How easy is it to switch from English to Spanish? So, Kristen, oh man, we don't have an actual button. So on the front, when you open the lid of a G5, there are two buttons. One of them does absolutely nothing during the time of the rescue. The other button has the word Español above it. You press that and it goes right from English to Spanish. Press it again, it goes right from Spanish to English throughout the entire rescue. So very easy. Which is worse for the lifespan of the unit, keeping it outside in extreme heat or cold? Good question. So, surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, these AEDs were built to be very durable. So whether it's shock, drop, temperature, adverse environments, dust, water, they're built to be very durable. So the two big things on an AED that are most sensitive to temperature are the batteries and the pads, both for hot and cold. Now, every AED is a little bit different. So again, I would go to referencing your user manual or ask the manufacturer, but normally the AEDs can be for anywhere from 3 to 5 days around a range of 100 to 120 degrees Fahrenheit, if not even a little bit higher. So the AED batteries and AEDs can last in extreme heat. Now, the pads, I mentioned those are a water-based gel. Obviously, extreme heat over an extended period of time might have an effect or an impact on that gel. So it could theoretically dry out sooner. But again, I mean, without knowing the exact environment or condition or how you're keeping it or holding it, I can't say that for sure. In a cold environment, water-based gel, if it is exposed to below freezing temperatures for long enough, those pads could theoretically freeze. So every AED is different in what it self-tests for and how it communicates, hey, there's a problem. But I would just keep an eye on, if you know that it's below freezing, it's not that you can't keep AEDs in below freezing temperatures. Right now in the state of Indiana, I think almost every patrol vehicle has an AED in the back of their vehicle, and it does get very cold there. I think it's just about kind of having a plan at the front end. Hey, in cold environments, this is what we're going to do to help maintain the readiness of our units. Damien was just on, I think it's upwards of 85-90% of patrol vehicles in the state of Florida where it gets really hot. They also have AEDs in their vehicles almost every day and night. And again, it's just about having a plan in place to maintain readiness. Recording. So I think, Amber, this is a question for you about a recording.
Yeah, I did reply. A recording will be made available. But yeah, that looks like that is all of our questions. So it is now time to announce our winner of the Zoll AED Plus. The winner is George Catherine. Please stay on. I will be contacting you to get your shipping information. For those of you who did not win and are looking to purchase an AED, we are offering a webinar exclusive discount of $300 off a Zoll AED Plus business package. You can use code ZWebinar300. I will put that in the chat so you don't have to write that down. If you have any further questions or would like one of our experts to reach out to you about AED solutions for your business, put your email address and phone number into the chat as well, and we'll connect you with a team member. We hope you enjoyed What is an AED webinar and would like to thank you all for joining us today.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Take care. Thank you, everyone.
Happy Wednesday.
Thank you.